Hello, Miss Sherry. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good, Miss Donna.
Okay, y'all. I have Miss Sherry Royal in the house today. Thank you, Sherry, for coming over, for
Oh, no
visiting the
problem.
house. I appreciate it. I know Sherry from high school, junior high, and we kind of lost touch through the years with each other and reconnected through social media.
Yes.
And Sherry's on here today to talk about her story of living with addiction, of a little bit of trauma in the childhood. And she's just going to kind of give her story and kind of tell her
Yes.
story and take us to where she is today. And that is doing an amazing podcast, which I am extremely proud of her for what she's
Thank
doing.
you. Thank you.
Living living through
The insanity.
That's it. Living through the insanity. I'm sorry, my mind went blank. Um, and it's so good. It's real. You keep it real. And
Thank you.
I'm so grateful that you're doing what you're doing. People need to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. I felt so alone going through addiction with my ex spouse, and I didn't want to talk about it. And when I did, people thought I was crazy. So, with this podcast, I just want people to normalize that this is happening all over.
Mhm.
It's a just it's horrible for one thing, and um, it's everywhere, and it's growing. The problem is growing, and our prisons and our jails are backed up with addiction and addicts and alcoholics that have made the wrong choices. So, and I'm still going through it today. I mean, it's one day at a time. And even though I divorced my ex spouse, um, now we deal with our children that are addicted and alcoholic. Um, so, my hope and prayer is to break the generational curse somewhere down the line. And I know a lot of people, I believe in God, but a lot of people would say, oh, this is just hopeless. But in
Yeah.
my opinion, yeah, God's still in the miracle making business. Um, he can show up at any time.
Bingo.
And right before this podcast, my son, I have not spoke with him in 5 days. He was supposed to go to rehab, never showed up. And right before this podcast, he reached out to me and said he was sorry. And I said, can I pray with you after I get through with my meeting? And he agreed. So I know that God is talking to his heart as we speak. He's turning things around. It's just a matter of his timing and when he wants to do it. And that's really the hardest lesson that I've had to learn through this whole journey of mine because I'll start back when I was a child. I did not grow up in an alcoholic home.
Yeah.
I grew up in a home where it was just quite the opposite. I was raised Baptist, Southern Baptist. My mom did not have alcohol in the house. She did not believe in drinking, dancing, any of that. And she was on the other spectrum as far as when she saw people drinking, it really frustrated her and she talked about it all day long. And come to find out later years, her dad was an alcoholic and he drowned in a boating accident from alcohol. He got underneath the boat in League City, could not get out. And my mom was 18 years old. So that trauma went through her married life. And so I did not grow up in this alcoholic home. I grew up in a home where my mom was very sick. She was very hypochondriac. She wasn't available when I came home from school. She was asleep in her gown, always had something going on. So, long story short, I ended up dating a guy that had all these addiction issues. And at the time, I didn't know anything about it. Um, So we got married very young, and I just clung on to him, and he was just like my everything. I was so in love, I couldn't see past my face. I just thought that love was the grandest thing. I couldn't wait to get away from my strict mother. And I had a baby at 18. So the first 10 years of our marriage, we went along pretty well. He did smoke weed, which back in the 70s, almost everybody did. And I didn't really pay much attention because he was functioning and working. But when the 90s came, he started getting into hard drugs, cocaine, and that's the drug. And so for years, we just fed off of each other. I would, leave him. He would get sober. He would come back. And this just would go on. It was like a vicious circle. It was like a roller coaster ride. And I wasn't aware of Al-Anon until probably in the 90s. My daughter was a teenager, and he went to rehab many times. And so when I got pregnant with my son, my daughter was 18, and I was told I would never have another child. Um, in my mind, I thought, oh, this is God, reworking all this. And now that he's having a son, things are really going to turn around. And they didn't. I moved up here to Conroe, where I'm living now, to get away from him. And again, he went into rehab. And after I'd been in Conroe a couple of years and I got a good job, he came up to Conroe and started working the magic, telling me he's sober, everything's going to be good, we're going to buy a house. And we did. But long story short, I stayed in the madness and the sickness of the addiction until 2014. And I went through a lot of heartache because, we all know that addiction gets worse. It doesn't get better. And so he got worse, and he was doing things I wasn't aware of. I was leaving him with my son, thinking he was staying at home, being a stay-at-home dad. I was working, and he was taking my son to crack houses. So all these things came forward when my son started to get in trouble in school. And then I woke up one day and I just decided, you've had enough. Your parents are gone. You don't have to put up with him anymore. You don't have to depend on him, because in my sick mind, I always thought, well, he works a little bit, so I'm getting some income. But really, now that I look back on it, it wasn't enough to do any good. And the problems and the pain he was causing me was not worth the money that was coming into the household. But again, when you're in that cycle, you're just as sick or sicker than the addict. So I continued to try to manipulate and control. And I finally just one day, it was just like, I'm done. So the good thing is he's sober. As when he was told to leave again for the last time in 2014, he got sober, and he's been sober almost 10 years. He's going up on 10 years. So it really was a good thing for us to be apart. But the damage that I did to my kids still haunts me, even though I know I'm forgiven. I did what I could at that time. My kids are all, they're both going through a lot of issues. So that's why I really started my podcast, because with my son, it was so much worse, because he started getting into legal problems starting at 12 years old. So it was a whole different ballgame than just the drugs. It was legal problems, me going through the court system, me being drug tested weekly. It was so much trauma that I don't even like to go by the courthouse nowadays. Like, I don't even want to be near the courthouse, because I would be called from work at least twice a week to go over and stand in line with all these kids that were in trouble and be drug tested as an adult myself. So it was really, and I've never done drugs. So it was very humbling and very traumatizing at the same time.
Mm.
But now that I'm on the other side of everything, my son is still suffering. He had sobriety time. He has went to prison, been through all that stuff as a mom. Now he's going to have a child. So it's a whole another level of scariness into the picture. But I'm doing well now because of the fact that I went to therapy for many years to work on me. And B, I really highly recommend Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, getting into group support because those are the people that are going to help you to understand what you were doing the whole time was wrong. And there's a people that you can soundboard off of every week when you go to your meetings and help you not to enable the addict because I was the worst enabler. I've had to completely not give my son any money. A lot of times I block him on the phone while he's in active addiction. And it's really hard or harder when it's your child. Even though he's a 23-year-old man, he's been incarcerated so much of his teenage years. It's like you're dealing with a 15-year-old. So that's why Living Through the Insanity got started last year. And I just want to continue to put out topics that people can relate to and that might help someone get into recovery. Because I'm in recovery. I'm a codependent, and I'm in recovery. And do I have days where I am crazy and out of control? Yes. But I quickly go to all my literature. I quickly start praying, pick up the phone, call someone. And I'm so much healthier now than it's almost been 10 years since I've divorced than I was even 3-4 years ago. So I think it's something that we have to grow in and continue to do. And although I'm not an expert, I'm not a therapist, I'm not licensed, I just feel like the last 30 years has given me a ton of experience to share. So I don't really know where my podcast is going to go. I'm hoping I can keep building it, but I'm new in it. It's only been a year this month that I put out my first podcast. So that's really how the story, I guess, that I have. And I want to add that I am a born again Christian and I believe and I pray without ceasing every day for my kids and my friends and everybody that's struggling out there. Because let's face it, the world right now is kind of in a scary place. So that should have been probably my number one thing is without God, I would not be here.
I understand.
I know you understand.
Even though I have never been through everything that you've been through, I've never walked your path. I have dealt with addiction in with both of my ex-husbands. They were
Yeah.
both addicts, different things.
Yeah.
I'm not here to tell their story. That's their story to tell, and I'm not here to tell that. And I'm very fortunate that my children, I say my son, well, I won't even go there. My son is somebody I pray for daily.
Yes.
He loves the Lord. He is a Christian and he loves God. And I'm so grateful for that. But he's still dealing with some issues in his life. And as you stated, or I'm not, you didn't state this exactly, but I believe that we both pray and we both have to leave our children at the foot of the cross, so to speak, and say, God,
Yes.
we cannot fix them. I mean, you cannot do that. And honestly, it's not our job. It's not our job to fix people.
No.
They're God's to take care of. It's our job to pray. We are praying mamas, and we'll keep praying.
Yes. I
And
kind
so,
of think about it how I was taught one time in therapy. The best analogy I could say is like putting your qualifier into one of the bank machines and sending them up to
yes,
God, but you're sending them up to God, and don't pull it back down, because that's the mistake we make, is that we'll grab it back down to try to do it. But God says, get out of the way,
yeah,
because I'm going to take care of it in my timing. And if you continue to move in my behalf, I'm not going to be able to move.
that's right.
So I struggle with that daily. And I think as moms, we all do a little bit, but I just have to go to bed at night knowing that, hey, God's large and he's in charge, not me.
Mhm. Yes, I cannot. On my own, I am nothing.
Mhm.
And without God's help, I know I wouldn't even be here today. And I don't think, and I know that my prayers have, I see God answering my prayers. It may not be the way that I would like for him to.
Yes.
I want to go in and say, okay, God, here's what you need to do.
Mhm.
This is how you need to, talk to him, talk to her.
Yes.
And my daughter's doing great. I mean, she is a mom, and she's got one and one on the way. And I mean, her and her family are like any normal family. They've got their issues, but they're doing good.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I still pray for kids, both of them, every day. In fact, this morning, me and God we had some time together, let's just say, because we're getting ready to do Thanksgiving. And that's always a uh,
Yes.
challenging time, especially if there's any kind of, um, maybe somebody that has an addiction is walking into the situation that you're going into. And there's, I'm not, again, I won't go into to detail about what we're going, who all's going to be at Thanksgiving dinner, but because again, that's not their story, is not my story to tell.
Yeah,
But
the way Thanksgiving and Christmas goes is about this perfect family unit getting together. It's beautiful, snowy weather. But in reality, it's such a stressful situation, because sometimes you're putting people together around a table that don't like each other, that are having issues with each other. And so this year, thank you, Jesus, my sister and I were estranged for quite a few years after my parents passed. We had some issues there. But the way God moved in that situation is I'm actually going to my sister's for Thanksgiving. The first time we have had a Thanksgiving dinner since 2010. So I'm not even going to my daughter. So that right there, if you knew this whole situation is a God thing, and we were talking about it the other day, it's just that, with kids and grandkids and people, like, it's just, and I always have to remember, because I get overwhelmed and I'm like, it's one day, Sherry, just like Christmas, one day. Don't get ahead and start making all these plans and trying to overspend and everything, because it's one day and you just got to get through the one day.
Stan,
So this year I just let it ride out. I didn't make any plans with anyone. I didn't want to really go to my daughter's, because her husband's, first year that he's been not here, he died. And I knew that things aren't perfect there. So I was just like, if we have to cook here, if we have to go out to eat, I'm not making any plans. I left it up to God and we got that invitation. So we're excited that we're going to actually sit down with my sister and have Thanksgiving dinner. So it's going to be nice. And
Awesome.
I'm here for it this year.
That is awesome. Um,
Yes.
no, so could you talk maybe a little bit more about the programs that you've been involved in? Can you explain
Yes.
that?
I started out going to First Baptist Church of Conroe. They had free counseling. So I took advantage of that first off, and there it was Christian counseling. So that was my first, I guess, therapy sessions. Back in the 90s, I started going to Al Anon, which Al Anon is everywhere. They're in every city. I started out in Pasadena. Now I go to the one in Conroe, which is very close to me. But there's an Al Anon in every city, and it's for friends, family, anybody that's affected by alcoholism or addiction. They mostly are more on alcoholism, 12-step program, but you can put addiction in that sentence. If you don't want to go into Al-Anon, you can go into Nar-Anon, which is Narcotics Anonymous Families of, which is just a little bit different because to me, it's more, it's centered just straight on drugs. And I don't think everybody is just addicted to drugs. I think my belief is if you're addicted to drugs, more than likely you can't have a drink of alcohol. That's just my belief. So that's why I go to Al Anon. Also, you can get a sponsor that you can call and you can work the steps. I haven't done that. But I do read in my daily readings. I have a book in here right now, but Courage to Change is one. And I just read every day. It's got something good to talk about being in recovery. Also, I went to a therapist through my insurance when I worked for the county. When I went to divorce, through my divorce, that helped me immensely because when I went through my divorce, I was so broken because we'd been together 30 years and I was so codependent, even though I told him to leave. When he got sober, he served me with divorce papers. He found someone else. So that left me hanging on a ledge going, oh my gosh, he's moving on with his life. And to be honest, I started going out and drinking a lot at that time and just sitting with people I didn't even know just because I was lonely. So I started going to therapy to work through all of that. And it's just been a continuous cycle. I went to divorce care. Divorce care is, man, I can't recommend it enough. Because when you've been married as long as I was, it's like a death. It really, but the person's not gone. So you're still dealing with them. And he kind of like blocked me. It was like all of a sudden I was the toxic one when he got sober. He blocked me. So my son was coming through all these problems and I couldn't call him. And so I felt like I was completely alone. My parents had just died. They had died 2 years prior to that. So I was going through all these big life scenarios, my parents' death, moving from my house to another house, my son, and I really honestly thought I was going to lose my mind. So if I had not grabbed on to all those tools, I don't know what would have happened. I really don't. Because I was doing the way wrong things. I mean, I was just throwing caution to the wind. And now that I've gone through all of that and I can look back and see how crazy it was, I'm at such a more peaceful, healthier place. I don't even really know how to explain it. And also, I think turning 60 was a big thing for me.
Mhm.
When
Yeah.
I turned 60, it was like, okay, I'm 60. That's when you start looking at the bottom part of your life, like you're at that hill and you're going down and you're going, I want to do this, 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 and this. I don't need all this other aggravation. So I think it's been a little bit of everything that has molded me. Also, I go to church. Shout out to my church. It's the Ark here in Conroe. It's a very big church. But they have all kinds of life groups and things like that. And if I don't go to church, I listen online. And when I'm working, because I work at home, I'm self-employed medical biller. So I listen to podcasts every day when I'm working. So I feel like just constantly growing and learning is the way to get through. I don't think we can ever stop growing.
No, 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 you are, um, I'm 60 as well. I turned 60 in January, this past January, and it, I find myself wanting to learn more now than I ever had. All
Yeah.
of a sudden, like, I mean, I'm in learning mode. Anything I can learn about what I want to do, and mine
Mhm.
is podcasting. So I'm listening to other podcasts and um, reading books. You know, I can't sit and physically read books because I work from 8 to
Right.
5, but I have audio books and I listen to those, and those help me tremendously. But yeah,
Yeah.
like you were saying, turning 60, it was a big deal for me.
Hmm.
It was huge. It's like, okay, I have less time left to live.
Yes.
So I better get on the move
Yes.
to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish. I'm going to have to put fear, you know, get fear out of the way.
Aside.
Yes,
Yes.
you're right. And just go for it and just do it. I was talking to somebody recently, and we were talking about the podcast and everything, and I said, this is just, it's not perfect. The podcast is not perfect. It's not about being perfect. It's just about getting on here and doing it. And I
Yeah.
had a young man ask me, I was purchasing something and we were talking, and I said, yeah, I've got to go home and get ready for my podcast tomorrow. He goes, oh, what's your podcast about? And I said, hope.
Yeah.
Huh? I said, bringing hope to people. I said, I'm having people on, interviewing people. They're telling their stories. People are coming on telling their stories of how they've been through horrible things in their life, but they've come through on the other side. And it's
Yes.
about how they overcame. And I told him, I said, I'm a Christian, so that plays a part in this podcast. I don't hide that. I
Me
said, that
neither.
is definitely a part of this podcast. Now, I may have people on here that maybe they're not claiming to be a Christian, and they may tell their story, but it's still hope. It's bringing
Yeah.
hope and how that they've come through.
Yeah. And I really believe too, like talking about, your podcast that you had before a couple of podcasts ago about the churches that we grew up in. There was so much stigma. And my mom drilled into me all these things that you wouldn't do, that you better not do. You better not show up here, because if God comes back, you're going to hell. I mean,
Hell,
fire and brimstone, that I was so scared when I went to church, because my mother would literally push on my back and say, you need to walk down the aisle. And I would just stand firmly, like, no. So when I finally got to be an adult and I started going to a church that was not fear based, it was scripture based. I accepted the Lord then. And for years, I didn't want to be baptized. I thought, no, not going to do it. Don't have to. I'll be in heaven. But then it was in 2017, I believe, and I had my grandson with me. And we were at church, and it just, God spoke to me, and he goes, today's the day. You're going to be baptized today. So I went and I was baptized, and I felt, so much better because I wasn't pushed. So that's what I try not to do, because people don't want to be pushed. They want to know. It's good to tell the story of your salvation, that God's there, that he's going to be there, that we have an eternity with him. But when you start to push like my mom did me, it's just not effective, it's not effective. And I know you went through a similar experience when you were young at your church.
Well, mine, in my situation, it was my parents took me to church. We started going probably I was about 4.5. And so from 4.5 till about age 9.5, 10, somewhere in there, we we went to church as a family. But then all of a sudden, my dad decided he didn't want to go anymore, and uh, that's a whole
That's
nother.
confusing. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
confusing.
and but in the church that I went to, because after we stopped doing that and we moved, my father moved us from, we lived in Houston, then Porter, Texas, and then we moved to Pasadena, where my dad was working. And my parents didn't take me to church from, like I said, probably 10 years on. And I was about 12, and I decided I wanted to go to church. My cousin was going to a church, and it was the same kind of church I grew up in when I was little. And so I started going to church with her from about age 12 on by myself and took myself there. Well, this specific church, taught that, you didn't wear shorts, you didn't go to movies, you didn't
Yes.
drink, dance, you didn't do any, I mean, it was just no jewelry, no nothing, didn't wear jewelry. Now you could cut your hair, you could wear makeup, and you could wear pants. We could do that, and that was okay. So it was a mess.
Yeah.
That's a
It's
whole nother.
organized religion at its best. I mean,
Well, my friend called it, he, because he grew up in it as well, the guy that I interviewed
yes.
called it a cult. Because
Yes.
on top of all of the stuff, we were also taught that we were the church. If you were not a part of the church, oh, you were still a Christian, but you needed to be a part of the church, and we were the church.
Yes.
The whole being a cult thing came
Yeah.
into
I get
and
it. I mean, I don't think Baptist was that bad, but my mom was that bad.
yeah,
She, but then she was the one on the other end that didn't go to church for a few months because she was too sick.
mhm,
So it was just a kind of an off and on, and it was so confusing. And when I got to be an adult, I've raised both my kids in church. And my daughter was baptized, I want to say a couple of years ago, rebaptized. She was baptized when she was in Lakewood when she was young. But then we all got to see her baptized a couple, 3 years ago. But I've never seen or known that my son, he says, yeah, I believe in God, but we've never went that far. So I guess that's who I pray for about that situation, because I feel like if he would surrender, and some AA people don't agree with this, if he would just surrender and take God's hand, that God's going to finish and pull him through, and not to be of the world, because I still do believe what you put in your ears, your mind, and everything will influence you. So I don't like rap music, and that's all he listens to. I listen to Christian music mainly. I will listen to some country, but I really feel like what we feed our minds is what's going to come out, and
yeah,
how we're going to be on a daily basis. So, um, and that, when I started going to this church here in Conroe, my mom thought it was a cult. She said, "Do they study the Bible?" I said, "Of course they do."
mhm,
But being that it was you know, a non-denominational church, she didn't like that. "Why don't you just go to a Baptist church?" she said. And I said, "Because I don't want to.
yeah,
I want to do this church." So I've been going there. I moved here in 2003, and I've been going there. They met in the high school, and now they've got a huge church. But I've been going there all this time I've been a member. So If I ever do move from Conroe, I will miss that church and my pastor because he's my age, and I like to hear my age preachers preach. But I know I've
Yeah.
kind of gotten off on that. But that's one of the reasons I've made it through. I
Yes.
mean, my ex went with me to church. I've seen him with his hands up and like, slain and prayed over, and then go out of church and use drugs immediately. So, we went there for many years, and now he is one of the AA people that believes that it's a higher power, that it's an organization, AA, and that's how you get sober. You work on the steps, you work with other alcoholics, and he's hardcore. When you say, "Hey, I'm praying," he's like, "You don't need to do that. You need to work with an alcoholic," or he has all the AA lingo still. But thankfully, we've went from not talking to being very angry at each other. He remarried, to now we can actually have a conversation about both of our kids, and we don't sling mud, nothing. I can be with him and his wife. I was just in October, me and my man, we went to Lola's birthday party, my granddaughter, and we all sat together, which that would have never happened in the last few years. It would have been like, I wouldn't have, in the first few years of my grandson's birth, I didn't go to the birthday parties because him and her were going to be there. But now, it's like I said, God can come in and heal all that and take it
Yes.
away. You don't have any of those feelings anymore. You don't have any of that junk, that jealousy. There's no place for it anymore because we are a family and we're there for the common cause of our grandkids. And so I don't want any type of animosity or problems. I just want to be able to get along, have a smile on my face, and see my grandkids.
Yep. Well, I am so glad that you came on and joined me today. I'm so excited. Um, I would love to maybe have you back on again one day, and maybe you could talk about a little bit more in depth about some of the stuff that you discussed on your podcast.
Yeah,
I would
definitely. I just keep putting the content out. In fact, I'm going to do one tomorrow on relapse because right now I'm going through relapse with my kids, and relapse sucks. It really does because you have all this sober time and then all of a sudden the person changes again. And so then you start to relapse and you have to grab back on to your program and then go, okay, they're relapsed and this is what's going on, but I can't sink down that hole. So I try to I pray about it. I pray about what subject that I want to write about, and then I write about it, and then I record it. But my goal is to have guests. So I would love to have guests that have a story and that have come to the other side. Even maybe they're not on the other side, but they just want to come on. So that's what I've been trying to put out there, is to contact me by email or just my Facebook page, Living Through the Insanity .com. I would love to have more guests, more stories in the future than just me talking like
yes,
you.
yes, ma'am. I don't. I mean, I can sit here and like you, I can sit and I can write things out, and I can do a podcast, and I've done that on Spotify.
Yes.
That is great. That is wonderful. But I prefer to have, I do better sitting and having a conversation with somebody. I do
Yeah.
better. And so I'm just, again, I'm grateful that you came on, that you come over to the house, that you're talking to me. I'm so grateful to have you here. And again, you said that where can people reach out, again, reach out to you? You said via your email, correct?
Yeah, it's Sherry Royal 35 at gmail.com. or Sherry Royal at livingthroughtheinsanity.com. It's all tied in together. Also, I'm on Facebook, Living Through the Insanity. You can like, follow. I'm always putting new podcasts on there, and also sharing different quotes and stories and reels. So, yeah, you can message me on Facebook in my messenger if you want to come on, if you have any questions, or but also, just any of those three ways you can get a hold of me. And
Okay.
I'm
Well,
going to start doing some networking as well. I've got a couple of groups that I'm going to be able to go to on Fridays and network with other people and podcasters. So I'm hoping to maybe get some guests that way. It's not a comfort thing for me to go and just show up and meet other people, but I have a really good friend that has a digital creation business, and she's encouraging me to just show up and start coming to these things. So I've got to step out of my comfort zone, being here at home, and
yeah,
drive down on a Friday morning and have coffee with these women and start
definitely
getting to know them.
love it. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, well, sweetheart, I love you and thank you again for coming
Love you
and
too.
being my guest. I really appreciate that, and I'm excited for you. I think God has great things in store for both of us in the future, and
Agree.
I look forward to having you on again.
Thank you so much. I hope y'all have a happy Thanksgiving.
You too, baby, and we will talk to you later.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.